PARTYNEXTDOOR's career is really interesting, not just because he has a unique path into the industry, but he also has a very unique mindset regarding his place and role in it. And in today's video, we'll be looking at all that in PARTYNEXTDOOR's story. He's been one of my favourite artists for a long time and has steadily been a star in the new wave of neo R&B since he came out in 2013. But before we get to that and more, let's rewind all the way back to his upbringing and see how he got here. Now, Party's a private person, and his single-digit number of interviews makes this video harder than others I've done. But there is enough to piece it all together and get a clear image of what he's all about. Born to Trinity Jamaican parents in Mississauga, a neighbouring city of Toronto, he was raised in two countries that shaped who he is today, Canada and Jamaica. And this upbringing and two different ways of life was just the start of his worldly and eclectic experiences, but also entirely informed his musical identity. A few genres really established themselves as pillars of his sound, with one being 90s R&B that his dad loved in Canada, and the others being part of the local Caribbean culture of reggae and dancehall. He grew up singing in church, and like so many other great R&B artists of our generation, he cites acts like 112, Boyz II Men, Jodeci, Joe, and Donyell Jones as his inspirations and early favourites. But there was another rising sound that was beginning to take over as he really started thinking about what he wanted to do with his life, and that was Drake and 40's Dark Toronto sound. As a teenager, it was a dream to one day work with them, but even as a high schooler, he was ready to make it a reality and start forging the life he wanted. At first, this meant reaching out to like-minded individuals on MySpace to form a collaborative community and network of creatives. But he was also hoping to get beats from people, reaching out to established producers and labels, and getting ghosted by almost all of them, with the rest politely declining, not seeing the vision. And he realized that most local producers were instead rushing to give their best beats to Drake, and not wasting them on a random 16-year-old. But how Party deals with this setback proves pivotal in his career, and is what makes him a very special and unique artist. Instead of sulking or giving up, Party decided to learn how to produce his own beats, to chase his own dream, and not rely on others. And this reliance on himself eventually made him a self-made and isolated creative, actually preferring to work on his own, exclusively using his own beats, recording himself, and mixing and mastering it. And after a year of working on his own music, he was discovered by a manager who took him out of his town and to the city of dreams, Los Angeles. Luckily, his living expenses were being covered by his manager, and his mum was supporting his dream by chipping in $50 for groceries every fortnight. But as a 17-year-old, Party dropped out of high school and started working his first job. Not as an artist, but a songwriter. And he was driven and motivated to repay both his manager who took a chance on him and his mum as he worked on writing songs for pop stars like Justin Bieber. The issue was, these early songs were lacking something. None of them ended up getting used or made. They were bland and lacking emotional substance, which shouldn't be surprising for a kid, especially given his writing style, which is entirely predicated on truth and personal experiences. When writing for himself, he doesn't fantasize, he doesn't exaggerate. These things happen to him even if he doesn't want to admit it. But when he writes for other people, he allows his mind to wander and imagine. But with this comes a lack of gripping storytelling that feels real. And that to him is only resolved one way, and that's getting in character and essentially role-playing as the artist he's writing for. The problem with that is, it's hard to do when you're not writing with an artist in mind, or if you know nothing about them. But these are things he'll learn about himself a little later on, because so many things come with experience. But he was still honing his craft and actually made a variety of solo songs and covers of Aaliyah and Michael Jackson songs, all of which became part of an unofficial compilation, the Jerron B Collection, the name he went by before the one we know today. There was one song that seemed to serve as a creative breakthrough in his songwriting though, his own song, Daughter. This song tapped into a new level of vulnerability and form, telling the story of a drug-fueled one-night stand that would have made him a father if the would-be mother didn't take action to prevent it. He essentially sings to his unborn daughter, condemning her mother and hoping that she wouldn't be anything like her. And as brutal of a story and reality this was for him, it seemed to break the mold in his artistry and make him realize how important real-life experiences were in cracking the code and making something cerebral. This song is also important in his story as it perfectly epitomizes his two types of songwriting at that point. Writing directionless pop and R&B for unknown stars, and writing personal songs for himself based on his own life. The stories that he told through his own songs were much more interesting, as they were always backed with truth and in reality, not being something he has to imagine. And this also made it easier for him to convey the appropriate emotions that he could pull from personally by just thinking how he feels. And this type of realization in his talent made him outgrow being an outsourced songwriter for others, realizing that his music was too personal to sell. There are a couple of other elements that led to this creative breakthrough, and that's drugs, namely weed. But also his nocturnal schedule of only writing and working late at night into the early morning, as this twilight time is when he's at his most vulnerable and emotional. He originally swore off drugs because he didn't want to lose control of himself and his thoughts by being under the influence. But as an overthinker, after being peer pressured by a friend, he found that it actually helped make his songwriting that much more emotional and vivid. But totally don't do drugs. Because Party's big on life experience, and this will be a huge trend throughout his entire career, being something that he continues to chase to inspire his great songs. And his new adventure was moving to Miami, somewhat of a party capital and a place he took huge inspiration from, as seen on a project like Partymobile. But this move and change in lifestyle was reflected in his music even back then. And again, as an experiential songwriter, he was chasing experiences like this and putting himself in positions to do so. So at this young age, he was a teenager living and partying in Miami like a superstar. And it starts making sense why even his debut project, PND1, feels so ahead of its time and ahead of what you'll expect from a 20-year-old. But before we get there, he's currently about 18 years old and the year is 2010 or 2011. But the confidence he had in himself is crazy. He took a meeting with Jimmy Iovine, co-founder of Interscope Records, and actually pitched himself as a solo act, trying to break out and escape from being pigeonholed as a songwriter for others. And he did this assuredly, telling this music legend that nobody else can deliver on the songs that he writes other than himself. Nobody could execute his vision and story like him. And he doubled down on his faith and backed himself further by saying that he knew his artistic direction and the world he was creating, and he wasn't going to change for anybody or deviate away from that. And this remains true throughout his career. He's never catered to a sound or an audience. Instead, he makes the music he wants to make that's always inspired by R&B. And hopefully it resonates with enough people to do well and become popular. But these dreams weren't based on fame or money, but rather expressing his art and telling his story the best way he could. And despite seemingly being turned down, this choice and his resolve set him on his path, and he never looked back. Since his high school days, he had unknowingly developed himself into a complete artist, capable of writing his music, producing his beats, and recording his vocals. But what I find more interesting and what I really want to stress is how much of Party's career he forged himself. And it was largely done off the back of his supreme confidence in his unique and special talent. This started with him asking established producers for beats as a high schooler, then overstepping his songwriter role, almost demanding to be signed as a solo artist instead, and eventually being a complete artist who does it all, orchestrating his own career and succeeding at every turn. But there are parts of his story that seem a bit kismet or fated too. Like I said, he always held this idolization of Drake and 40 and what would be OVO. So much so that Party changed the pseudonym he was going by, Jerron B, named after himself, to PARTYNEXTDOOR, which was taken from a production filter on FL Studio because the effects sounded similar to the emerging sound of 40 and Drake, and he thought it sounded cool. And while the specifics of this part of his story are murky, we know enough details to have a good idea of how it went. And what I'm talking about is finding his way to OVO. Again, you could imagine this being a dream come true situation for him, but it wasn't charity and it wasn't his only option. We're now in 2012, and Party was a sought after name as an artist with potential, so offers were on the table. But during this past year, as Party kept to his craft and created, he did work with a producer who actually sent one of his songs to Boy Wonder. He was part of Drake's camp as a local creative, friend, and in-house producer. Loving what he heard, he passed it on to Oliver Al-Khatib, who led the crew's music discovery front, being the one who put Drake onto The Weeknd and so many others since then. And from him, Party's music made it to Drake, who loved him. This all happened over a few days, and eventually Party met with OVO in a parked Range Rover on a random Toronto street. And despite having a few offers on the table, and OVO being the last to do so, he knew right away that this is where he wanted to be. And not long after that, he joined what is affectionately known as the OVO Bootcamp. While we don't know exactly when he signed, if it was before or after this, the timing lines up with OVO Sound signing March Jordan in the later half of 2012. And following The Weeknd slipping through their fingers, the signing of these two acts seemed to really kickstart the rise of the label. They came into a fully booked out studio every day, having their own space to create, prove their worth, and hone their craft. And Party contributed 2 songs that made Drake's Nothing Was the Same, Own It and Come Through. And their natural collaboration as a pair and duo marked their easy friendship, which started here. And Party links it to their Toronto roots and Caribbean links, with Drake having a lot of Jamaican friends and that culture being prevalent in Toronto. But now getting an idea of who Party is, it's clear he didn't join OVO to make friends or work with some of his biggest influences. Having these new resources available to him, like an elite team of producers who Party idolized and based his own sound around, didn't change the way he works. Essentially, all of PND1 and PND2 were made solely by him, and the majority of PND3 as well, making his own beats, recording himself, and even mixing it all. Meaning that everything we hear is exactly how he envisions it. I think what really drew him to OVO was their promise of freedom. Party really values having their trust and respect to be left to his work, letting him create what he wants to create and how he wants to create it. So many other labels take a full hands-on approach in an artist's career, or enforce deadlines and release dates at a minimum, demanding regular music. And I've seen so many people make this argument against Party or other OVO Sound acts, of generally saying that they would be so much more popular and successful if they were signed to someone else. And while I can't completely disagree because who knows, people have to realize that not every artist cares about making the most amount of money, being on every front page, or getting the most number ones. Not everyone's definition of success is the same. To an artist like Party, as long as he's given room to create freely, tell his story the best he can, and be untethered by the politics of the industry that OVO protects him from, he is successful and happy doing what he loves. Working with OVO has enabled him to do exactly that to the fullest, never forcing his hand creatively or pushing him to do interviews. In fact, they actually believe in the opposite. Oliver believes that being private and allowing your music to speak for itself is the best way to build a sincere audience that's here for you as a musician, not any antics. And this seems to be true, because despite Party's aversion to the media and press, like another artist tied to the early days of OVO, he's still become an enigmatic superstar who's cultivated a cult-like following, as not only your favourite artist, but as one of the most influential people in R&B and pop music today. But again, it's built on the back of his music and the way that it resonates with all of us, not through popularity, likes, and viral campaigns. And the consistent theme this threads between Party and the label shows a very copacetic ethos that's shared between them. This is how he wants things to be. But Party stresses that he isn't trying to be intentionally mysterious, but rather his true private self, unapologetically. He always wanted to live a normal life, even when the music industry breeds fame and fortune. But they were never his intentions. Telling his story and his music impacting people is all he ever wanted. But his all-encompassing approach to music is what makes him so special to me. We've already talked about his personal, experiential songwriting. He views all of his various relationships, hookups, and whatever else as content. So his breaks between projects is him experiencing life and gathering topics and stories to share. And this is something that we assume is a natural concession for so many singer-songwriters, that they need to almost chase heartbreak and tough relationships to create interesting and emotional music that resonates with people and sells. I think a great example is his EP 7 Days. The whole thing was made in 7 days, but was inspired by one night when his girl walked out on him. And instead of chasing after her or calling up someone else, he walked right upstairs into his studio and made a song about the situation. This is how raw and immediate his storytelling can be. But he always ensures that he tells the truth and is completely honest in these songs, even if it paints him as the bad guy. When he writes for other people, he takes a totally different approach. He doesn't draw from his own life as directly, and actually likes to sit down with and interview the artist he's writing for. He likes to get in their head and write like them or from their perspective. So he becomes a journalist, an investigator, and a friend, asking them personal questions to peel back the layers of them. The best example of this is his smash hit collaborations with Rihanna, and specifically the story behind Work. In a Malibu mansion at essentially what was a songwriting camp for her album Anti, she gathered dozens, if not 100 of different artists, producers, and engineers, and got them in their own rooms to create. Party was one of these guys. And he insisted on getting some one-on-one time with Rihanna to help his process, and being a fan of his work, she agreed. And he asked her all types of things. What are her favourite scents? What are her favourite foods? Does she drink? Even what turns her on? And after learning that she was really into vodka at this time, it was his friend's first time seeing Party drink vodka, as he fully embodied her. And 45 minutes later, a hit was made and Work was done. Individually, his complete approach makes him a creative juggernaut, capable and valuable in every situation. But he also has an uncompromising vision of knowing exactly what he wants and being able to create exactly what he envisions. He also works on multiple songs at once, switching between them as ideas fly around in his head, because every idea is valuable to him, often being written down and saved for another song. He views his creative process like a puzzle, and he loves trying to figure it out and piece it all together. Another thing that makes Party and his approach unique is his commitment to a certain type of representation through his music. Like Drake fills a quota of rap and R&B songs on each project, Party does the same by sprinkling in reggae and dancehall along with his typical brand of R&B. And along with that idea, he also holds on to his heritage and roots proudly by intentionally using Toronto slang and Jamaican patois to achieve the same thing, and make sure he does this on every project. But everything he makes and plans to make is created on the backbone of R&B and his Caribbean heritage, the music that raised him and influenced him to do what he's doing. But Party's story is far from over, and interesting and worth telling. It's a classic case of talent meeting hard work and confidence, and that makes his life anything but normal. And that's what makes him such a special and unique creative. From unrealistic hopes to refusing to be boxed in, his rise was backed by his unrelenting vision, as he opted to create on his own, not being slowed down or having his vision blurred by engineers, producers, or anyone else. He trusted himself as the only one to get it done. In these types of videos, I like using what we know and found out to predict what's next. What does Party's next project look like? And as much as I want to make a bold claim or call it now, it seems like it's entirely down to where he is in his life when the time is right to create and make P5 or whatever might be next. He could fall in love and make a 20-song deep album on true love. Is it likely? Hate to say it, but probably not, Party. But judging off P4, which I think is the best barometer for us, the searching question of that is definitely on his mind as he gets older. But his player ways and indulgent lifestyle prevent him from truly loving. What I feel more confident about is the same ratio of sounds existing on the next album. He's shown a consistent effort over his whole career to represent his two halves, his brand of R&B and his Caribbean side, and I don't see that changing. But as an experiential songwriter, his life could take him anywhere, and his pursuit of experiences definitely will. Maybe real love is on the horizon. Or maybe the same old, with new twists, turns, and drama. But that's going to wrap up this week's video. Thanks for watching, and go listen to some PARTYNEXTDOOR, because I had a great time listening to his stuff on repeat for the past 2 weeks. And learning all this stuff about him just gave me another level of appreciation for him and his music. Like, all of his songs being true is insane. But yeah, thanks for watching again, have a great day or night.